Hey everybody, it's Dr. David. I'm here to give you a Berger Bite for an Omicron update. Today is December 23rd, and of course information is changing very rapidly, but this is the lay of the land as I'm seeing it right now. Now, as you've probably heard, Omicron is incredibly contagious. Seems like by far the most contagious of the COVID variants so far, but also one of the more contagious viruses that we're going to come in contact, period. So that's the reason why we're seeing this huge spike happening. The reality is, unless we're living in a plastic bubble, we're probably, almost all of us, going to be exposed in the next month or two. Now, we are hearing that the virus is more mild for this variant. Now, there's a couple really important points here. That is the data that we first saw out of South Africa, where the population is mostly having immunity from wild disease. And then secondly, from the United Kingdom, where most of their population is experiencing herd immunity from vaccination already. So, of course, if there's immunity ahead of time, then we expect a virus to be more mild. Now, so of course that leaves the population who has never caught the virus and who has never been vaccinated. And we do not have enough data yet to know that this is going to be mild in those individuals. So that's kind of the population that may be most at risk. Now, even if it is more mild, there's going to be a percentage of people who are going to get sick. And of course, with how rapidly this is spreading, if 1 million people a day are catching the virus, which I don't think is unrealistic, versus 100,000 people getting the virus, if 1% of the people get sick, obviously, when you multiply that by 1,000, then that's what can overrun our healthcare systems. That's what could knock out a good part of our workforce, etc. So that's kind of why, continuing to do testing, doing rapid testing, negative, then moving on to PCR testing, to not be sharing it with other people, to more kind of like, remember we talked about bending that curve back in when we were talking a year ago, almost a year and a half ago now, so that we can at least sustain as a society without everybody being knocked out all at once. Of course, availability of hospital beds and those types of things for people, unfortunately, who end up in that situation. Now, there's some really interesting information, though, about why all this is happening, both the contagiousness and the mildness. And this is coming out of information from Hong Kong. Research there is showing that Omicron is replicating mostly and very intensively in the upper part of the airway, the tracheae, the bronchi, etc. And so this will cause more of a bronchitis type of symptoms, which doesn't usually involve having low oxygen levels or having shortness of breath type of thing, but it causes that bronchitis type of hacky cough. And of course, that's going to spread it out even more. A lot of people with pneumonia don't have that much of a cough because it's settled down in their lungs. And that's what the other variants were showing in the air spaces. But when the virus is accumulating there and there's inflammation there, that's what causes fluid building up in the lung tissue. And then of course, you can't really exchange oxygen or carbon dioxide if there's fluid in that space where it's supposed to be air. So be on top of watching this, but this is a really fascinating thing, and maybe a very good explanation as to why we're seeing a different type of clinical presentation, and hopefully more mild, although of course more widespread. Of course, testing, as I mentioned, is positive. If positive, now you're going to be hearing some information, I think, in the next week or two about quarantining, and you're going to hear probably about people who are vaccinated, and my stance in terms of people who have immunity, whether it's through the wild disease or whether it's through the vaccine. We know that immunity has been waning, so a person who was vaccinated only back in January, February, or people who would have caught COVID in 2020 or early 2021, we know that those antibodies are fading. People who have antibodies that were built earlier, more recently, are going to be more protected, but you're going to be hearing most likely about possibly a 5 or 7 day quarantine period for those people as well, so be on the lookout. We will make an announcement when we hear that kind of information. And also to wrap up, one of the things that I think a lot of people are developing optimism here is, might this really be the beginning of the end of the pandemic and us moving more into an endemic situation? I have a hypothesis that it's quite possible that previous coronaviruses, which are now common colds, may very well have been as severe as what we're seeing now. But of course, we didn't have social media hundreds of years ago to talk about it. And of course, people weren't crowded on top of each other the way that they are now. And there wasn't nearly as much international travel to spread it along. But who knows? Maybe there was severe illness back then. Obviously, I don't know how I would be able to prove it, but we do know that those are common virus cold types of things. And so maybe that would be the thing that would kind of turn this into more of a cold/flu season type of issue as opposed to what we're seeing now. So I hope that that's helpful for everybody. Have a great day.